So, the most debated and most talked about part of grading, slab cases and labels. Everyone needs to rethink their positions. Welcome back, comic book fans, to Comics Rediscovered. As part of the ongoing comparison series, we now get to talk about the most contested aspect, but I think the conversation needs to change. After going through the process, I'm getting a clearer view that a lot of the debate comes to fanboying or agreeing with whatever trend you heard about without actually looking into it. That's not to knock anyone's preference, but as someone who was new to slabbing comics, there was definitely a lot of noise to cut through. So, let's jump into looking at these cases and labels. So without a doubt, CGC has become the standard for how the labels for comic grading should look. CBCS and PGX have both updated their labels to have similar aesthetic appeal. They all have the same general layout with the text on the left side and the number, and then a holographic logo on the other side. CGC's label holds the distinction as the current standard for a reason. The design is good. It looks polished. Even still, I think it looks the most polished. Let's look at what PGX has done. It is loads better than before. As soon as you see it, you know they took more than just inspiration from CGC. It's the same label. They basically reversed the color gradient, but otherwise, it's just aping the CGC label. Inasmuch, it just isn't as good. I wish they had done more or something different to be unique and maintain the polish that they have with this label. I do like their hologram. I didn't notice it at first, but it is a speckled hologram, and they also have the other hologram on the back. I do like this label, but it is very clearly a ripoff of CGC. Now, if we look at CBCS, they've tried to at least be different. Some people don't like it, but I actually think it does what it's supposed to do. After thinking about it, here's the difference as I see it. CGC is a great consumer label. It's part of the product. It's got eye appeal. No one will say it's a bad design or that it's ugly. CBCS seems to have gone in the direction of something professional. By that I mean it looks like something you would find in a gallery or like an archived piece. I like it. I like this professional look. I don't need it to be commercial. The other area where CGC has a distinct advantage is in their custom labels. Right now, CBCS and PGX do not have a custom label option. They all do the blue for standard, yellow for signature. PGX is kind of a goldy bronzy kind of color. And then of course there's a conserved grades and stuff like that. But for just the standard labels, CGC has the distinction of these custom labels, which are pretty dope if you've got a book that qualifies for it. So if you're looking for a custom label, you have no choice but CGC. So the labels are obviously a very subjective choice, but most people will tell you loudly and constantly, I might add, that CGC is the best looking, and I can't disagree with them. But honestly, I can go either way with CGC or CBCS. Okay, this is an area that very clearly had a lot of variation before. In earlier generations, once CGC switched to this label, they were very clearly flat out just the better case and label. But I don't think that's the reality anymore. Let's take a closer look at the actual cases themselves. So they're all very similar kinds of clear plastic. The book is held securely in the main chamber and the label in a separate upper chamber. With the PGX case, there's no delineation, whereas the other two have a separator, but not PGX. It's no big deal, it's a design choice, but it might actually make a difference. The separation in the CGC case is quite obvious, with there being two distinct chambers with a bar of plastic in between. Because the CGC cases have deeper wells, it's pretty obvious that it has that delineator line there. It's not as obvious with CBCS, but as far as I can tell, there is two distinct chambers. Why does this make a difference? Well, I've noticed with the PGX cases, there is some opportunities for things to shift. It may be that they weren't seated centered before they closed it, or maybe it has shifted after. I can't really tell. I didn't really notice the comics moving once they're in there, so my guess is because there's no separation, then it's easier to have things slightly askew in the case. Clarity of the slabs is good. Among the three, I think CBCS is the most clear, and I noticed something the other day with my black light that might explain why. The CBCS cases refract some blue light. This could mean that they offer some level of UV protection, as shortwave UV light carries the blue wavelength. But I don't think that's the case. If it was, I think they'd be all over telling you that your cases are UV protected, at any level. I wouldn't rely on them being protected. However, I do think that the chemical components that make up the CBCS cases is slightly different from CGC and PGX and allows them that clearer image of your comic through the plastic. The optics are probably slightly better. I think it's a chemical difference that gives the blue tint under UV light, as well as the increased appearance of clarity with the CBCS cases. So that doesn't mean that either PGX or CGC are unclear, but only that CBCS is potentially clearer when they don't have scuffs. See my unboxing video about that one. So CGC does have a clarity problem that people are well aware of, and it is Newton rings, and I don't know if you can see it here. They do come on some of the books. For whatever reason, CBCS doesn't have them. The sleeve that they use might be different, or again, it might be that that plastic is a different formulation than what CGC is using. I really don't know what the reason is, but CGC has them. I don't know if you can tell here, but depending on the angle you're looking at, there's these like little spotted rings around the book. So that is definitely a knock against their cases in the form of clarity. Whereas CBCS doesn't have those at all and does have the clearer plastic. Now, here's a big one and the real differentiator for me. The sturdiness of all three is great. They will undoubtedly protect your comics. However, in this comparison, there is a clear winner. So I noticed when testing that both CGC and PGX have more flex than CBCS. I don't think that's a feature. I tried to catch it on audio, but there's clearly a cracking and snapping noise when you flex these cases. And I didn't have any of that with CBCS. I tested this multiple times on a number of cases. PGX always cracked and had the most give. CGC cases always cracked or made some noise, but not always as loudly as the PGX. However, this kind of noise doesn't really inspire confidence. Again, they will protect your comics, no doubt, but the CBCS case just feels more solid. There is nothing to reduce my confidence in the case at all. So what about the cases overall? For me, it's CBCS. It's a nicely designed case, it looks good, and it feels real sturdy. CGC is no slouch. Some people will like it more, but with CBCS being clearer and sturdier, I can't give it to CGC on appearance alone. PGX, again, is taking up the third spot, but it's not a bad case at all. It just isn't as good as CBCS. I'd be interested to hear from you all. If you've used any of these companies lately, how do you feel about their cases and labels? It's going to be hotly contested, so I think we should all try to be civil. Where does that leave me in this comparison? My preference is leaning to CBCS. The resilience of the case and the clarity put it on top for me. I also like the labels, but I know lots may not. It's a subjective choice. If it was only on the look, CGC might take it, but overall I think CBCS is the all-around better choice if your goal is preserving and displaying your comics. If you haven't checked it out already, I'll have the entire playlist below so you can see the journey. Don't forget to subscribe so you can get all the new videos. Next, I'll be talking about the grading itself, which is hard because as much as they try to make it objective, there still seems to be a lot of subjectivity even within the same order. So stick around for that, and I'll catch you in the next video.